Welcome, and thank you for attending today's session of Lexbe's eDiscovery webinar series, Redefining High-Speed eDiscovery Processing and Production, presented by Lexbe Principal Karsten Weber, covering a study conducted on the standardized EDRM Enron dataset to evaluate Lexbe eDiscovery processing systems' TIFFing throughput rate and the architecture that delivers it. Our eDiscovery webinar series takes place once a month, and we cover a wide range of topics related to new litigation technologies that can help you control costs while managing increasingly large data collections. Today's webinar should last 20 to 30 minutes, and we'll have a URL to access a recorded version of the presentation available to anyone who registered later this week. To give you a brief overview of our focus at Lexbe, we develop and implement technology that helps legal professionals cost-effectively meet tight discovery deadlines, regardless of the amount of data in a case. We offer high-speed ESI processing and conversion services in addition to our web-based review tool, Lexbe Discovery Platform. If during our webinar there are any questions that come up or any technical issues being experienced, please email them to webinars@lexbe.com. Before I hand things over, let me tell you a bit about Karsten. As I mentioned, Karsten is a principal here at Lexbe, and the architect and lead developer of Lexbe's eDiscovery processing system. In addition, Karsten has a wealth of experience managing complex software development and is an expert witness consultant with the Lumen Expert Group. With that, let me turn things over to Karsten.
Well, thank you, Stu, and welcome. Today we got a very exciting webinar on high-speed processing and production. And we're going to cover some of the industry background, the amount of data that's being converted, and why certain types of conversions are important. And then finally, how does the Lexbe conversions compare to the industry? So let's start by looking at data globally. As we all know, the data is going up, and it's going up at an incredible rate to where it's predicted in 2015 we'll have about 4 zettabytes of data, which is the equivalent of 1 trillion gigabytes, or the same as 1 billion terabytes. And I still remember the first cases I worked on. That was a red whale, and if we had 100 pages, that was your average case. And then since then, as it goes up, just to give a reference, 1 gigabyte of, say, emails is the equivalent of about 50,000 pages if printed out. So this amount, if you were to print it out, would be absolutely staggering. So that's the global amount of data. How does that affect the individual cases? Well, they are rising at about the same rate, to where we can see, if we take an Enron data set, that was a trial back in 2005, they collected about 40 gigabytes of data that was brought into trial. And that was extraordinary at the time. And nowadays, it's nothing unusual to get a case of that size. So as the size goes up, the time in which to process the data and review the data has not gone up the same amount. So you may be on a tight deadline. You have to review your documents, and now you get a case that's 10 times bigger than last time. Well, you don't get 10 times more data, so we need a way of processing this data that is cost-effective and equally or more important, that it can meet the deadline imposed by the court. The processing costs are falling, so that's the good news. We can see about a 90% fall in 10 years to process. These are numbers on per gigabyte processing. But if we combine the growth of the data with the fall in the cost per gigabyte, the effective cost is still going up. Not as fast as the data, but it's still going up, so you'll have to allocate in terms of absolute dollars, you have to allocate more and more dollars toward the discovery processing of the data. Another way of looking at this is to look at the market as a whole, and you can see that software services is about at $5.5 billion industry, and it's growing at 15.5% annually. That size outperforms most other markets nowadays, and so it's very attractive for a lot of players to come in and participate, which drives a lot of innovation. And that's the good news for the end consumer. There'll be more and more choices, but still the absolute dollar amount will keep going up. Now that we've talked about the market, let's jump down and then look at some of the process, the steps that makes up those $5.5 billion. So typically in a case, we'll start out with the collection of the data, identify the custodians, get the hard drives or the social media sites in. Once that's collected in a forensically sound manner, it's simply too much data, and not all of it is going to be relevant for the case. So one of the early steps is to call the data down to just be from the people in question, the custodians, just from the right date ranges, et cetera, et cetera. And that calling will typically reduce the data set from wide range. I mean, anywhere from 10% reduction all the way to a 90% reduction. We've seen examples of both. And then we go through the actual processing, where documents are converted into a form that makes it easy to review. Then the actual review takes place, and then based on that review, you can go in and do the production. I want to point out on this slide that these flowcharts of the process, there's some very good resources, and as you probably are aware, there's the EDRM.net, which is the Electronic Discovery Reference Model. So EDRM.net. If you go to their site, you'll find the same, and they have lots of different ways of looking at the same. So that's a great resource for this type of information. That same organization has also put up a test set, which is the one we'll be using, describing later in this presentation. Here's some of the review platforms that are in use today. And as you can see, it's a mixture of reviewing documents in TIFF format versus PDF format versus, raw or native ones. And the TIFF format, which is stands for tagged image file format, is still very popular. It basically renders each page into one file. And so as you're reviewing it, if you're looking at page number 9, behind the scenes, there really is one file that corresponds to that. That makes it very easy to do certain things like bait stamp that document. It also works on all web browsers. You don't have some of the issues that you have with the other formats. The downside is that it tends to be much larger than like a native review. So this presentation is going to focus on the TIFF processing and how we take the original native files or the PSTs, the emails, and convert them into these individual pages of documents for review. And one of the reasons we focus on that was twofold. One is that, as you can see from this table, 91% of law firms have review systems that uses TIFF as the basis for the review. And then the second reason is that TIFF tends to be large, as I mentioned, and for that reason, it just tends to be one of the slower processing steps. So it's very important, 90% uses it, but it's one of the slowest things to take your emails and convert to TIFF. And so as your volume of documents increases and the time to the deadline remains fixed, it becomes more and more critical to be able to convert as fast as possible your original files into TIFF images. Here's a TIFF challenge. If you took a single machine and you took that standard data set that I mentioned earlier that was published by EDRM, and that's the all the emails that was collected as part of the Enron trial. You've got 53 gigabytes of data. And if you just have one machine or one CPU and you try to TIFF it or process it, you will see that on an average machine, it can do about 1 gigabyte per day, and you will need upwards of almost 2 months to make that happen. Or if you have a slow machine, I mean, you need the better part of a year. Even with the fast machine, you still need a month to make this happen. And that is the challenge. How do we make this fit into a known turnaround time? And again, this is for 53 gigabytes. So if you had 100 gigabytes, these numbers would double, and it would take more than a year for a slow machine. So you need more machines. That's pretty clear. But most people don't have an unlimited number of machines. So even if you had 2 machines or 5 machines or 10 machines, you can see these numbers are still working against you in order to meet any deadlines. So we took the Enron data set, the 53 gigabytes of email data, and we set out to say, with the architecture we've developed, how fast can we take all of that data, convert it, and create TIFF so that the whole thing is ready for review? You know, how many days would that take? So the architecture is different from existing architectures. So the existing architectures really works on one machine at a time. And if you have 5 machines, you'll have to somehow take your system and your data and divide it into multiple batches or parts, and then run them on each of those 5 machines. And what we have here is a scalable architecture that's running on Amazon, and it allows us to dynamically add and remove more servers as needed. What that allows us to do is to very fast, in a matter of minutes, bring up more servers, and we can scale to hundreds of servers. And at the same time, you only need one person to operate such a system. You don't need, you know, one operator per machine. Let's talk about the process. These are the steps that we did on the email data in order to get it from the raw PST, Microsoft PST files, extracted into the individual email, got the attachments out, converted everything into TIFF single page images, and repairing of the file extension, extraction of the metadata, MD5, denisting, OCR. So we're really doing everything, and I think that's really critical. So it's a known data set. It's real life data coming from, you know, actual people that use the email, and it's doing all the steps, whereas this industry is sort of rampant with speed claims that often will take a data set that just happens to match the process, or they'll just give data for 1 or 2 of these steps. And so when you see our speed results, keep in mind that it's doing all of these steps as opposed to just 1 or 2 of them, which of course, if we did just 1 or 2 of them, our numbers would be significantly higher as well. But I think you'll still be impressed with what we're able to demonstrate here. Here we go. So lots of numbers. I want to just focus on the first 3 of them. So we're coming in with a known data set. It's available for download on the internet. Anybody can download it and run this as well, just to compare the speed. It's 53 gigabytes. had PST from 204, I won't say 204 people because some of them had more than one PST, but effectively it's 204 different email accounts. And across those 204, we had 875,000 emails, plus all the attachments for those. And then that's our input. And if you jump over to sort of the middle of the second part of the page, you'll see the daily processing rate. This is how fast we were processing on a daily rate. I should say we were able to process all of this not in 1 month, 2 months, or 200 some days. We're able to process all of this with 60 servers in 5.3 hours. And these servers are the fastest servers that money can buy within the Amazon cloud. And if you take that you can process about 50 gigabytes in about 5 hours and you convert those to daily rates, then that is what you have in the second half, saying on a daily basis we have a capacity to process roughly 240 gigabytes of data, or 4 million email messages, or 23 million pages. So we can ingest, or we can take in 240 gigabytes, take it all the way through all the steps we just talked about, and out comes single page TIFFs for every single email and attachment. So here's an example, and basically showing the original file and how it looks in the TIFF version and the corresponding text. So it's as you would expect, all the data is there and it looks the same. And then if we look at the quality control, we have, as I said earlier, a system that only requires one human to operate. So there's no error for batching out, which you typically have in other systems. We've got all the QC that you would expect, including the ones listed here. Here's a list of some of the providers of TIFF processing, and basically they tend to fall in two categories: the service providers, which is the first row that you can partner with, or you can go out and do transactional processing, or the professionals, which are internal to the law firm. And then the third category is the software providers that you can either as an individual go out and purchase and run a smaller job, or the software providers that some of the ones in row 1 and 2 are using. And if we look at one of the biggest one out there, Xerox, in terms of capacity, we have from their marketing or service literature, we have that they have a capacity of 5 million pages per day. So this is the combined capacity across all the offices that do processing within Xerox. And so it's more of a theoretical capacity than a practical one, because you would have to call up every single office and divide your job out across all of them. And so by comparison to their claim of 5 million pages a day, we have demonstrated on an actual data set 23 million pages a day, or 470% faster. And this is, again, in a single office, so it's something that you don't have to divide your job into multiple parts to achieve. So in summary, TIFF is important and turnaround times are critical. The traditional approach have a fixed capacity, 1 server, 5 servers, 10 servers, and since they have that fixed capacity, then when you come in with a variable amount of data, you will now have a variable turnaround time. And if you come in with a job that's 10 times faster, then expect that it will take 10 times longer than the smaller job. And they simply can't procure new hardware and software fast enough to make it count on the job that's at hand. I mean, you cannot go to Dell and buy machines fast enough and set it up, buy the software, install it, and have it in time for something that needs to be done 3 days later. And so the Lexbe approach instead is to have it highly scalable. We can add more machines in a matter of minutes, and that now means that the bigger the job, the more machines we procure, and they all get started, and now the fixed amount is the turnaround time. And so we're able in, say, 3 days to be able to deal with jobs of hundreds of gigabytes in size. We believe that what we've demonstrated here is the fastest TIFFing in the world. And if you can do fast TIFFing, you can also do other kinds of processing fast. And that this approach will now allow you, the end user, to meet even the toughest eDiscovery deadlines. And with that, I'm going to turn it back to Stu.
Great. Thank you very much, Karsten. And just in addition to our TIFF processing, as Karsten is alluding to here, we also offer a full range of processing services that go from collection through to the production stages of discovery as well. If there are any other questions that come up, please contact us at the information that you see on your screen. You can also visit us at www.lexbe.com for additional webinars, articles, and other eDiscovery resources, as well as more information about the services just listed and the TIFFing processing services we've described here today. So thank you all very much for taking your time to attend today's webinar. We hope you'll join us again in the future. And we will have a recorded version of this webinar available via email and also available on our site to anyone who'd like to watch again or pass it along. So thank you again for your time and have a great day.